Hello, world history students. I'm back. It is Miss V. It's been a tough little road, but we back. And today we're talking about the Cold War. We're starting how we transitioned from World War II and how the Cold War began. This is Guided Notes 15.1, so let's go. So let's talk about how the tensions happened between the United States and the Soviet Union after World War II. The Soviet Union felt that they needed security on the western border because they felt that the Allied powers were going to push towards democracy. And the Soviet Union was a communist nation, so they did not want that. And they didn't want that type of influence in their territories. So, and they were not prepared, as it says here, to give up control of Eastern Europe after Germany was defeated. So now there's this tension between the Soviet Union and the United States. Now, the United States and Great Britain and those allied forces believe that Eastern Europe, or those countries that were once a part of occupied Germany, they believe that those countries or those nations should be free to determine their own government. So they're saying that Poland and Czechoslovakia, a lot of those countries that were occupied by Germany, that they should be allowed to make their own decisions of how their government should be run. However, the Soviet Union was like, nah, we got it. We just gonna make them communist. That's it. Alright? So now there's tension between these two countries. So now this Cold War begins, right? The Soviet Union stayed in conquered areas, and now those areas that I just mentioned, like Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, parts of Czechoslovakia and so forth, they're setting up pro-Soviet or pro-communist regimes in those areas. And now, because they're setting up these communist nations, right, and pro-Soviet communist nations, the United States is not really trusting Stalin, right? And now they're becoming this bitter rival between democracy and communism, and both of them are kind of fighting between each other of how one is going to influence the other, right? Alright, so here's a little bit about Cold War foreign policy on both sides, right, of the coin. So on the US coin, or on the US side, the Truman Doctrine was created in 1947, and this allowed the United States to provide money to those countries that they felt were threatened by communist expansion. That means that the United States is going to pour money into those countries, especially those countries that were war-torn from World War II. They're pouring money into those countries if they stay non-communist, right? So particularly, as you see here, Greece and Turkey were given millions of dollars just so that they can remain non-communist, right? And then they also came up with the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was a policy to prevent the spread of communism by also providing financial support with those countries that had economic problems. So this was kind of an expansion from the Truman Doctrine. And as you see here, it provided $13 billion to rebuild war-torn places in Europe from World War II. But also their underbelly, or their under secret agenda here, was to stop communism from spreading. So they were giving money to those countries that was like, yeah, we don't want communism here. And they're like, sure, let's give you money, right? So that's the case there. On the other side of the coin, in the Soviet Union came up with COMCON, and that was the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, and that was almost like the back door, or the antithesis, or the, how can I say it, like the mirror image of the Marshall Plan. So it's the same idea, right? They're giving money to places in Europe that is going to be pro-communist, right? So same idea, just on the Soviet side, but ComCon, right? ComCon didn't work because the Soviet Union, remember the Soviet Union was ravished by World War II, right? And also World War One. So financially, the Soviet Union did not have the capacity economically to provide for those nations. And a lot of them got upset with the Soviet Union because of that. And we'll talk more about that on the other end when we talk about decolonization. But the Soviet Union was not able to provide that financial aid and assistance, and therefore ComCon fell out. It dissolved. Okay. So there's also a division of Germany and also its city Berlin. Okay. And this happened after World War II in those conferences that we mentioned before, with the Yalta Conference, the Potsdam Conference, those conferences that came about to discuss, okay, well, what's going to happen after now that this war is ended, right? So the Allied powers had decided to divide Germany. Now that Germany is dissolved, Hitler is gone, right? So they decided to divide Germany into 4 zones. And as you see here, these are the 4 zones. Britain had one zone. The Soviet Union had another zone, the United States had another zone, and France had another zone, right? But they also divided Berlin, which is right here, right, into those 4 zones as well. So the city of Berlin is also divided into 4 zones. Now, the Allied powers, these 3, right, were making plans to kind of unify that part of Germany and make it one big Western German Democratic Republic, right? Guess who's gonna have a problem with that? You might have guessed it, the Soviet Union. Of course they did. They had a problem with that, right? They didn't want them to unify those 3 Western zones in Berlin nor in Germany in total, right? So guess what the Soviet Union does? Soviet Union issues a blockade of West Berlin. Okay, so they blockade, meaning that they place trucks, they place military equipment or military guards and so forth across that area. So it's not going to allow any trucks, trains, barges, anything within those western zones. So they're actually placing a blockade around those zones, right? And because they wanted, as you see here, the Soviets wanted to secure economic control of all of Berlin, but they also wanted to make sure that that Western German part of Berlin and also Western Germany did not happen. They didn't want that to happen. So with that blockade, they figured, hey, this is gonna happen. We gonna stop y'all from doing this, right? So guess who saw that as a front or a threat? Like you know, the United States, right? The United States was like, oh, Soviet Union trying to push up. They trying to start something? Like what? Right? So the United States realized that, hey, these issues are bubbling and it could present another war. They just got out of World War II. They did not want to have World War III, right? So the United States decided, okay, let's back up a minute. We ain't trying to go, toe for toe here. They decided to fly, and Great Britain flew airplanes above in the airspace, right, and dropped supplies in for people in West Berlin and Western Germany, in that Western German states, right? And they did that daily, as you see here. 13 tons of supplies were flown in daily, right? And this was called the Berlin Airlift. Okay, tense time, yes, because they didn't know what the Soviets were going to do at this point, right? But again, remember, the Soviets does not have enough money. they're economically struggling a bit, but they don't want the other side to really know about that. But so because of that, they don't want war, so they gave in and lifted the blockade, as you see here in 1949. So all is quiet on the front for now, right? All right, so remember we talked about this whole West Germany, West Berlin thing. Eventually that did happen, right? Once the blockade happened, this tension increased, and the United States was like, I don't trust Soviet Union. We don't trust them. They might do something. So Great Britain, France, and the United States decided to follow through with uniting that area of West Berlin right here. Remember we talked about that. So West Berlin is united, and they went ahead and joined those three German states as well. So now you have two zones in Germany. Okay, one side was West Germany, and the other side was East Germany. One side, especially that side that was controlled by the United States and Great Britain and France, that was democratic, and in East Germany, that was set up by the Soviet Union, that remained as a communist influenced state. Okay, so East Germany is communist, West Germany is democratic, a democratic republic. Okay. So now there's also new military alliances that came out of all of this. Remember, there's a lot of tension still happening here, especially between the United States and the Soviet Union, right? On the Allied side, this happened like not too long after World War II ended. They set up what is called NATO, which we still have today, right? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And this was an organization that was created by them in order to provide help if any one of them was attacked. So again, remember that we talked about in World War I. One of the things that caused World War I was alliances, right? Remember that? Here again, but in this instance, you actually have an organization that is dedicated to help each other if one is attacked, right? And if you look in the blue here in the map, all of the ones in the blue are NATO members. Okay, so those are members of NATO. And then on the flip side was the Warsaw Pact, right? The Warsaw Pact was a military alliance just like NATO, that was headed by the Soviet Union and other Eastern European countries to provide mutual help if any one of them was attacked by NATO or people that were against communism. Okay, so those that are in red are countries or nation states that were a part of the Warsaw Pact. All right, so that is the first half of our discussion of how the Cold War began, right? But now we're going to talk about this nuclear race, and it is a lot to take in. It's big, but we're going to talk about that in the next half of this video. So I'll see you in a bit. Peace.